Hey guys, it's Carolyn, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited today to talk about all things safety with Gail Gould. She is the CPR and Safety Lady at CPRandsafetylady.com. Good morning, Gail. How are you?
I'm good, Carolyn. How are you?
Good. So before we get into all the great safety stuff, tell us about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Okay, well, where should I start? I was a group and exercise fitness instructor for many, many, many years. And I have a theater degree from UT in Austin. And then when that didn't work out, I thought, well, I'll just get up in front of people and that's how I'll meet my performance needs. And I did that for many, many years. I was a personal trainer here in Houston, a group exercise instructor, and taught all over the place. And then after, 10, 12 years of doing this, I got tired of being a leotard. So I decided to go back to graduate school and get a graduate degree in exercise science from U of H. And I loved it. I had such a wonderful time at U of H in the graduate program. Met so many nice people. And when I graduated, I knew I wanted to do corporate health promotion. So this is back in 1989 where you could actually call people up on the phone and reach people on the phone. So
Yeah,
I
not so
remember
much anymore.
I just got married. I remember sitting in my office at the second floor, and I would just cold call people, and people would answer the phone. We'd have these nice conversations, and I'd ask them, do you want tobacco cessation? They're like, no. Do you want to stress management? That kind of him and haw. Ask them, do you want weight loss classes? Then when I'd say, are you interested in CPR first aid training? They all said yes. And they were, this is
Yeah.
back in 1989 where everybody was just trying to kind of getting their emergency action plans together. So I was fortunate, to hook up with some of the major oil and gas Fortune 500 companies. Chevron's been my client for 25 years. Bechtel's been my client for 25 years. And so that's kind of how I got started. And, I started off small, and I was a health coach for Kelsey Siebold at the same time. I was a health coach for Humana. And then it just kept growing, growing, growing. And now, probably for the past, I'd say 10 years, it's all I've done. And I love it. It's so much fun. It's so rewarding. And that's kind of how I got started.
Gotcha. All right. So why should everyone know CPR?
Oh my gosh. Why should everyone know CPR? Everyone should know CPR because statistically, Carolyn, we know the people you're most likely to be using it on are family, friends, and loved ones. American Heart Association
Really?
estimates around 485,000 people. They have new numbers. These are only about 4 or 5 months old. 485,000 people will go into sudden cardiac arrest this year. About 23,000 of those will be kids. And they estimate that between 100,000 and 200,000 of those lives could be saved if more people step up to the plate to provide CPR. Less than 50% of Americans know how to perform CPR. Not very many people know how to perform CPR. And another interesting statistic, 70% of parents admit they would have no idea how to help their child if their child would have a medical or injury emergency. And I see that all the time. It's just,
Sure.
I personally think it should be required for all new parents to take a CPR class before a baby comes home from the hospital, but I'm currently not in charge, so that's not a requirement. But in some places it is. One of the cool things about social media, somebody reached out to me about 4 or 5 years ago on my social media from Lithuania. And she said that in Lithuania, you must have a CPR first aid card in order to get a driver's license. And I think it's the same way in
Really?
Germany. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, that would never happen in Texas.
It should, though. It should.
Every
I
man
mean,
for
how long does becoming CPR? How long does it take to learn CPR?
at a minimum 2 hours. CPR AED.
Gotcha.
We never ever, Carolyn, teach CPR without the AED, the automated external defibrillator. And that's another thing. I don't think people realize what an important role the automated external defibrillator plays in the person's survival. Now, what happens is, when somebody loses consciousness and stops breathing, it can be from a number of different reasons. It can be from the main reason adults age 35 and up go into sudden cardiac arrest is going to be heart attack. There's drowning, poisoning, drug overdose, trauma, lots and lots of reasons. But where was I going with this?
So the AED machine,
Oh,
and that so you
thank you,
you keep it
lady.
together.
Right. And so what CPR does is it keeps the heart, brain, and lungs alive until the AED arrives. The reason people typically go into cardiac arrest is their heart rhythm goes into spastic abnormal rhythm. And the only way to get the heart back into a normal sinus rhythm so it can function normally is to give the person's heart electrical shock with the AED. You can give them CPR all day long, but until they get used to the AED, they're probably not going to survive. So CPR is meant to keep the heart, brain, and lungs alive until the AED arrives. Like after the Damar Hamlin incident, the Buffalo Bills football player a few years ago, I got numerous emails and phone calls. People like, oh, I didn't know what an important role the AED plays. I was like, yeah, it plays a really, really, really big role. And another thing that's kind of a misnomer, Carolyn, people often think it's just old, out of shape people this happens to. And that can be
Yes.
further from the truth. Happens to kids, about 23,000 kids. When I say kids, I'm saying young kids up to teenagers go into sudden cardiac arrest each year. And about 7,000
Wow.
of those are athletes.
I know. I was reading an article on your blog about a school that had one, but it wasn't working, right?
Well,
And
that happened
and it
just this last August here
yeah.
in Houston. And what happened was there was a 14-year-old who went into cardiac arrest in the gym at Marshall Middle School. And it's unclear as to whether he received CPR. What is very clear, and I was interviewed by the Houston Chronicle about this story, what is very clear, when the AED arrived, they opened it up and the battery was dead and he died.
Oh God.
I cried. I was just like, oh my God. So, most likely, the gym wasn't excessively hot. It was not drug related. Most likely what happened to him is that he had an abnormal arrhythmia he was born with that nobody knew about because he probably not had an EKG. And,
Yeah.
teenagers don't have heart attacks. They have these abnormal arrhythmias. And had the AED been working, there's a good chance he'd still be here today. So I don't know why the autopsy is taking so long. But once the autopsy comes back and it shows that he had an abnormal arrhythmia that he was born with, a congenital abnormality, their lawyer, Chris Tritico, I'm sure you probably know, I'm sure will find a
Hmm.
way to sue the school district.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
just,
So
a tragic story. After that happened, the HIC's lawyers got involved and they had to fess up that 170 of their ADs in their schools were non-working. And there was a
so they
nurse,
had them, but they're
they were not working. So there was a nurse who was interviewed on KPRC. She was a retired HIC school nurse, and she said she quit her job because she kept letting the principal know the battery in her AD is dead, and he kept telling her there's no money in the budget for it.
so is it something that needs to be charged? How are they? How often do they need to be maintained?
Oh, it's like your smoke detector. The battery is good for some of the with some of the new technology. The batteries are good for 7 or 8 years, but generally it's about 4 to 5 years. And it's just like your smoke detector. If the battery is going bad, it's going to chirp, just like your smoke detector. And the pads expire after 2 years. Texas by law,
Hmm.
schools are required to have AEDs that are in working order and a team that's trained to use them. And so to me, this case at Marshall Middle School where this happened is bordering on criminal. So
Yeah.
I hope that Chris Trutico finds a way to, and after that happened, wherever I would teach a class, I would ask people, do you have kids that go to HIC? And people raise their hand. I was like, ask the nurse or the principal if you're one of the 170 schools where the ADs are non-working. And 3 people got back to me and said, yeah, my child's at a school that has one of the non-working ADs. Now, obviously, supposedly HIC is stepping up to the plate and they're going to buy new batteries and train people, and we'll see what happens.
So, like, if you haven't been trained in how to use them, should you use them or no?
They're so easy to use, Caroline. I train 10-year-olds to use AEDs. That's how
Thank you.
easy they're very. Now, if you've never seen one before, you might not know you have to cut the person's shirt. You have to cut the woman's bra, shave the man's chest, but they're very, very easy to use. They're very user friendly. And I literally trained 10-year-olds. I mean, that's how easy they are to use. And, but the first step is start CPR to keep the heart, brain, and lungs alive until the AD arrives. This happened, I think, about maybe 8 weeks ago. It was a distant family member, went into cardiac arrest. His wife had no idea what to do. So what did she do? This is so typical. She ran for help, which is, what you don't want to do. You don't want to run for help. And I don't know how long she was gone for. Maybe, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes. Well, while she was running for help, his brain was dying, because your brain can only go about 4 minutes without blood and oxygen before it starts to die. By the time she got back, I'm sure his brain was dead. And I know when he got to the hospital, I heard through the grapevine that all of his other organs are fine. It's just his brain had died. So, what we recommend is that you start immediate CPR. Call 911 and start immediate CPR, because you can absolutely, positively save someone's life.
So if someone stops breathing, would you always use the AED machine, even if you didn't know if it was a heart attack or anything?
Yes, you always use the AED. Always, always, always. There's lots of things that can cause people to go into these cardiac arrhythmias. So, and basically, you attach the AED to the person, and it will instruct you what to do. It may say no shock indicated if need to begin CPR. So it will let you know whether the person needs a shock. But
Gotcha.
you always attach the AED, and you attach it to infants, children, adults, pregnant women. Anyone who's unconscious and not breathing needs an AED attached to them. To give you kind of an idea here of survival rates, 90% of adults who go into cardiac arrest are going to need to get shocked with the use of the AED. And each minute they go without getting shocked, their chance of survival goes down by 7 to 10%.
Wow.
So you have to lay around to wait 10 to 15 minutes for the paramedics to arrive with an AED. What's the chance of survival? 0. That is why all schools in Texas are required to have AEDs. Obviously, all hospitals have AEDs, shopping malls have AEDs, airports have AEDs, government offices have AEDs. And why is it? Because it's not reasonable to expect EMS to arrive in the first 3 to 5 minutes. That's
Yeah.
really what the person needs in order to survive.
Wow. And yeah, when you're on the AEDs, and so then I read another blog article that you had about SCA.
Sudden cardiac arrest.
Yeah. And so what does that look like? Or how can we is it the same steps for us, like
Yes.
watching?
Yes, sudden cardiac arrest and cardiac arrest. What those mean is when somebody goes into sudden cardiac arrest or cardiac arrest, those are interchangeable. It means they lose consciousness and stop breathing for whatever reason. There's drowning, poisoning, drug overdose, blood loss, anaphylactic shock, heart attack, stroke, lots and lots of reasons people go into cardiac arrest. But we tell people you don't need to diagnose why they're in cardiac arrest. That is an emergency room issue. All you need to know about a victim is, are they conscious or are they unconscious? Breathing, not breathing. You have the slightest inkling they're not breathing normally or they're not breathing at all, immediately start CPR. So you don't need to diagnose why they're in cardiac arrest. But, this is kind of an interesting statistic. I'll ask you and kind of a trick question. Do you know the main cause of death of children ages 1 to 19?
Choking.
People always think it's choking. It's gun violence.
Really?
Isn't that shocking?
Crazy. That is shocking.
Pre-pandemic, it was motor vehicle accidents. But since the pandemic, now we know it's gun violence. So number 1 cause of death of children is gun violence, number 1, motor vehicle accidents, number 2, drowning is number 3, and choking is number 4. Now, main cause of death of babies, infants, under the age of 1 is obstructed airway, is choking for babies. But I know it's just, I can just give you story after story after story. And it's not just active shooters. It's that, here we are in Texas, gun capital of the world, and people unfortunately just don't unload their guns and lock them up.
Yeah.
Just last year, there was a case of a high school sophomore at a school very close to where we live. He got a hold of a gun, and no one's quite certain what happened, but he shot himself in the stomach and he died. It was a loaded,
Oh my God.
unlocked up gun. My son, who's 21, so 3 years ago when he was a senior at Morrill High School, the patrol leader of his Boy Scout troop best kid ever. Everybody loved it. Everybody wanted this kid for their son. Super smart, super industrious. Got a hold of an unlocked loaded gun in his house, shot himself in the head.
Oh my God.
Nobody had any idea. Nobody had any clue he was going to do this. No clue at all. So what I tell people is, I implore people, if you have guns in your home, please unload them and lock them up from everyone under the age of 24.
I agree. That's crazy.
It's
I had
just,
no idea that was such a. And why do you think it changed since the pandemic?
I'm not quite certain, but I'm assuming more people have guns now.
Yeah. And more people at home and more
Yeah,
kids school from home and
I just um, was driving somewhere this morning and I saw in someone's front yard a big sign that said "Freedom for Gun Owners." I didn't know they didn't have freedom.
yeah, right.
I didn't know. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wish I'd taken a picture of it. I found that I'd never seen that before.
That's interesting. Because there's not a whole lot of restrictions on guns in Texas, especially.
I'm sorry?
I said there's not a whole lot of restrictions on guns, especially in
Right.
Texas.
I had no idea why they had that in the front yard. But yeah, I mean, I think that, you never know when this stuff is going to happen.
Yeah.
And, I train a lot of new and expectant parents in CPR. And I tell people, ask your teacher, ask your child's teacher, do they know CPR? In Texas, by law, only one person in the entire school must know CPR.
That's it?
That's it. Now, preschool, daycare, when your kids are, babies and toddlers, by law, anyone who teaches preschool or a daycare provider must have CPR every 2 years. But once your kid gets to grade school, middle school, high school, and it's this way in most states, only one person in the entire school needs to know CPR. And what's interesting, I've been teaching CPR 35 years. And 30 years ago, child care licensing could have cared less about the daycare provider's CPR cards. Now they look at every single card. Child care licensing called me about 6 months ago. They said, can you make the font on your CPR card a little bigger? We can't see. My eyes aren't good enough. I can't see it. So I was glad she was paying attention.
I agree.
I
At
was
least they're
glad
looking.
she was paying attention. And so you need to make certain if your child's in daycare, that all the teachers must have CPR first aid. I do a lot of preschool CPR training. Once your child gets to grade school, middle school, high school, ask the teacher, hey, are you CPR first aid trained? And they may or may not be. A lot of the private schools have the money to train the entire staff. The public schools generally don't have the money.
Yeah.
And I know Spring Branch ISD, what they're doing now is they're offering their teachers the opportunity to take an online course. And then they have an in-person skills check off.
Gotcha. So can you become CPR certified from online?
It's an online class.
Gotcha.
And after they complete it's actually a pretty good online course. And after they complete that, they have to meet with someone like me, an in-person instructor, to make certain that their skills are up to date. And that's another thing. We no longer call it certification. They removed that term because it carries too much liability. So they call it course completion now.
Oh, okay.
Instead of certification. Here's an interesting question for you, Carolyn. American Heart Association recently did a survey, and they asked people, they're like, why, what's the main reason that would hold you back from taking the CPR class?
Time.
What do you think most people answered?
Lack of time or availability.
This really surprised me. Most people answered they were afraid of liability. They were afraid of being sued.
Really?
And that's kind of a no-brainer because you're covered under the Good Samaritan law. Just as long as you act in a reasonable and prudent manner, you act in good faith, you don't charge any compensation, you're covered under the Good Samaritan law.
That's
So
surprising.
that surprised me. Now you decide to give the person a tracheotomy, make a hole in their, which I've had 3 people over my 35 years share. 2 of them actually, one asked you to give his child a tracheotomy. The other 2 shared they actually gave people trachs. You pound on their chest like you see on TV. That's not reasonable and prudent. It's called a precordial thump. But just as long as you act in a reasonable and prudent manner, you act in good faith, you don't charge any compensation, you're covered under the Good Samaritan law. But that surprised me because for me, the main reason that I would have thought people would have answered was the yuck factor. They didn't want to put their mouth on a stranger.
True.
But you don't have to do that anymore because now there's 2 ways to do CPR. There's the traditional compression plus ventilation. Now there's hands-only CPR, which is
Right.
CPR with no breathing.
Really?
That's what we're recommending out in the community is CPR with no breathing.
So that's just chest compressions. Sorry.
Yeah, just chest compressions only. And we are highly recommending that because I don't know about you, but I'm much more likely to give CPR to someone I don't know if I know I don't have to put my mouth on a total
True.
stranger.
Very true. I know my daughter became a lifeguard, and she had like one of those guards like in her little
Yeah.
fanny pack. So I think and she was only a lifeguard for one summer, but I think that's great information, especially for somebody younger to know, because even if you don't recertify, at least you learn the basics.
I can
And
I can always tell when my classes, not always, but a lot of times I could tell if they were a lifeguard or Boy Scout or Girl Scout or former military because they had kind of a baseline of knowledge.
yeah, I
And
agree.
yeah, I was a lifeguard. It's super fun, and it's good training.
I agree. And for the real life and the first aid and everything. So tell us about the different trainings you offer.
Well, I offer several different trainings. Obviously, the one I do most often is CPR AED. And again, you cannot teach CPR without AED. They really go together. And so I offer that. That's 2 hours. So really not a huge time commitment. Not a huge time commitment. Then I offer CPR, AED, and basic first aid. And in basic first aid, we cover topics such as when should you call 911, how to control life-threatening bleeding,
Mhm.
how to recognize a heart attack, how to recognize a stroke, what to do for these people, how to manage a seizure, how to treat anaphylactic shock, which is severe allergic reaction. We now know 1 in 12 school children has a life-threatening food allergy, my child being one of them. We talk about injuries to head, neck, and back, injuries to muscle, bones, and joint, poisoning. So it just teaches people what to do. God forbid they are experiencing one of these, they've encountered one of these emergencies. And that takes anywhere between 3 and 5 hours, just depending on whether we're doing infant, child, and adult, or just child and adult CPR. So those are the two main courses I offer. I also offer a course called Stop the Bleed.
Mhm.
And Stop the Bleed is a 45-minute interactive course that teaches people how to control life-threatening bleeding. And so we teach people how to apply pressure, how to pack a wound, and how to use a tourniquet. 2 years ago at KPRC Channel 2, they invited me in. I think I did 6 Stop the Bleed trainings, and they wanted to do it because their sister station in Florida
Uh-huh.
had an, I believe he was on the air reporter shot and killed. This is about 4 years ago
I
this
think I
happened.
remember that. Yeah.
So that they wanted to know what to do if someone was bleeding to death. In fact, I believe the statistic goes like this: 35% of all pre-hospital deaths are due to uncontrolled bleeding.
Really.
So that's always, but what's interesting about that, Carolyn, people get this very strange look on their face whenever we talk about controlling bleeding and packing a gunshot wound. I had a preschool teacher share with me about 6 or 7 months ago. She said she was in Midtown about 1 in the morning. I was like, nothing good happens after
Yeah,
midnight.
really.
But she was there at 1 in the morning. She said the guy next to her got shot and no one was helping him. So she said she took his T-shirt and packed it into the wound and applied pressure. I know,
Wow.
it just, it's just like you only have to watch the news for about 10 minutes to see all the people that are shooting each other. I remember when I was in college at UT Austin, we used to laugh. We would laugh at the San Antonio news because back then, remember, shooting. Now it's everywhere. Now it's
Yeah.
just not San Antonio; it's everywhere. But yeah. And the other class that I offer is called Active Violence Emergency Response Training, AVERT training, and that teaches people how to defend, how to recognize, defend, and respond against active shooters. It's a
It's so sad
very,
that we need to train people how to do that, but it's not
isn't
going to
that
stop happening.
sad?
It is.
It's sad. Well, I mean, all school nurses now carry tourniquets. They have Narcan to treat opioid drug overdose, and they have tourniquets in case someone has life threat. I know. I just went up to Bunker Hill Elementary to drop off some flyers for a CPR class I'm doing there, and just you can't even open the door. You have to buzz you in, and when my son was at Memorial High School, my husband and I laughed. Anybody could walk in.
Yeah. Now it's
I
not that
never,
way.
what'd you say?
I said, now it's not that way. You have to get your driver's license, just buzz you in.
Yeah, I'm glad they changed it because I was like, wow, this was what like, well, my son's a junior in college, so this is about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
We were just like anybody in the world could just go walk in here, and I'm glad they've changed it. No, and I was glad that they have security at the grade school.
Yeah, absolutely. I know.
It's sad that it's got to be that way, but
But
that's just the way it is. But you know, um, let me ask you this question: for everybody that goes into cardiac arrest each day in the United States, what percentage of people do you think survive?
I'd say 50.
60,
50.
50, 50, 8 to 10%.
Really?
It's very low. Why are survival rates so low? Survival rates are so low because most Americans do not know how to perform CPR. Maybe the person wasn't found for a long period of time. The brain starts to die after about 4 or 5 minutes. Maybe the people didn't want to give CPR because they were afraid they were going to be sued. Maybe when they were compressing, they heard something pop or crack and they go, oh no, I'm hurting the victim. They stop. So survival rates are very, very low. If somebody who's in cardiac arrest, like Damar Hamlin, if they receive CPR and get shocked within the first minute to 2 minutes, now they have a 90% chance of
Wow.
survival. So that's why everybody needs to know CPR, because you can absolutely save someone's life.
That's amazing. That is amazing. So if people wanted to find out more about you and your trainings, where would they go?
They can go to my website, which is CPRandsafetylady.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at the THE CPR and Safety Lady. I spend a lot of time. I'm on LinkedIn at the CPR and Safety Lady. I spend a lot of time on Instagram and Facebook because I like making reels. Really,
It's very helpful information too.
What did you say?
I said it's very helpful information too.
Well, it's so important that we all need to know how to do this. People think it's never going to happen to them, and then the thing that triggers most moms, most parents, is choking.
Yeah.
And choking is always part of every CPR class. And, you're more likely to encounter a choking victim than you are a victim of sudden cardiac arrest. But, everybody needs to know what to do. God forbid someone starts choking, because we've all been eating and experienced something that was, stuck in. Around 4,000 people will die each year in the United States from choking. 3,000 to 4,000 are going to be kids. So the majority of people who die from choking are children. And I'm just always amazed when I go places, daycares and schools, and they tell me what some parents send. Parents send hot dogs and grapes. And you can't feed those to your kids when they're 4 and under, because they're major choking hazards.
It only takes one choking incident for you to be very, very, I guess, sensitive to it.
Have you had a choking?
Oh yeah.
Have you had a choking?
I've had one personally, and then I've had it happen to my kids, and you feel helpless.
Yes.
And it's like that. And
it happens so quickly. I know. I got a video. About it was 2, maybe 3 years ago, on a Sunday morning about 8 a.m. I was like, who's messaging me a video at 8 in the morning on Sunday? And it was from this mom who'd taken my CPR class the year before, and she was crying in the video. She literally was crying. She was like, my 1-year-old started choking on a piece of nectarine. My husband had no clue what to do. She was like, thank God I took your class the year before, because otherwise he would have died. I mean, she literally was crying. And just
very traumatic.
And I get probably every year 2 or 3 emails or phone calls. Oh my God, that thing you showed me how to do, I had to use it on my husband or my child or my coworker or my friend. And so choking is pretty common.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show and tell us how to be safe. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Hang on.
Nice to meet you.
You too.